Thank you so much for that introduction. I can say I'm really, really thrilled to be in here, that they let me into your country tonight. I just flew in about an hour ago, but it really was an accomplishment, considering what happened, I think it was last year or the year before. I wasn't exactly sure how things would go because there have been a few incidents over these last few years. Well, Seth alluded to it, right? But it was, about a year ago, and it was Thanksgiving time, and I was on a belated book tour for Breaking the Sound Barrier. It's a book of my columns that I write over the years, and it should be the motto of all the media, breaking the sound barrier. But it was Thanksgiving time. It was the only time I could get away, and in the United States, they were eating turkey, so I thought we'd come to Canada and talk turkey. So we were in Seattle, and we got in the car, and we're going to give a speech at the Vancouver Public Library and honor some of the community radio stations that run Democracy Now!, like CFRO and CITR. Hey, how many of you listen on the radio, actually, to Democracy Now!? How many of you watch on Vancouver Novus TV, NVTV, Channel 4? Well, you can. I just want to let you know, I hope every one of you gets one of these. It tells you where you can watch or listen to Democracy Now! And of course, at democracynow.org, you can listen and watch, and the transcripts of the show every day are online, the hour broadcast Monday through Friday. So we headed up to the border, and I thought it was going to be pretty routine. We were about an hour from the library on the border, and the talk was in exactly 1 hour. So it was pouring rain. We handed in our passports, and they said, pull over. So we went out to this, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, this big kind of warehouse facility that's Border Patrol. And they called me up. They said, Amy, we want to know what you're going to talk about tonight. I said, you talk about at the library? And they said, yes. I said, well, it's a public talk. You could come. So they said, no, we want your notes now. So I don't really speak off of notes. And I said that. I don't really have notes. And they said, we want the notes now. So I went out to the car, and I got a copy of the book, and I brought it in, and I said, well, basically, I'll probably read some excerpts of columns and then kind of riff off of them. They took the book, one started reading it, which I thought was a good thing, and another of the border guards started typing into the computer everything I was saying, and another was actually handwriting what I was saying. And he said, what are you going to talk about? So I said, well, I thought I would start with the last column, which do you want to hear what I'm going to say? And they said, yes. So I said, well, okay, I was going to read from it. Imagine the scene, America, 2009. 18,000 people have died in 1 year. Actually, it's more like 45,000. An average of almost 50 a day. What's killing them? Who's taking them out? To investigate, President Barack Obama might be tempted to call on Jack Bauer, the fictional rogue intelligence agent from the hit TV series 24, who invariably employs torture and a host of other illegal tactics to help the president fight terrorism. But terrorism isn't the culprit here. It's lack of adequate health care. So maybe the president's solution isn't Jack Bauer, but rather the actor who plays him. The star of 24 is played by Kiefer Sutherland, whose family has very deep connections to health care reform here in Canada, I said. Well, actually, I don't think I was actually in Canada at that moment. And of course, you probably all know, unlike US audiences, that Kiefer Sutherland is the grandson of the late Tommy Douglas, who really was the one who pioneered bringing Medicare to Canada, the premier of Saskatchewan. And astounding story, as I kept talking to him, I said, so I'm really here to talk about what works in the Canadian healthcare system. I mean, I said, did you detain Sarah Palin when she came here to blast you? I went on to talk about how Rush Limbaugh, Fox Channel's Glenn Beck, and insurance industry-funded groups are encouraging people to disrupt town hall meetings with members of Congress. Rush Limbaugh says 24 is one of his favorite shows. He's even visited the set. And I said he should learn from the real-life actor who plays his hero, Jack. Limbaugh and his cohorts may find that truth is not as satisfying as fiction. In 2004, a CBC poll named Tommy Douglas the greatest Canadian. At a protest in 2000 against efforts to roll back the Medicare system in the province of Alberta, Kiefer Sutherland defended Canada's public single-payer system. He said private health care does not work. America's trying to change their system. It's too expensive to get comprehensive medical care in the U.S. Why on earth are we going to follow their system here? He said, I consider it a humanitarian issue. This is an issue about what is right and wrong, what is decent and what is not. Maybe Jack Bauer can save the day. Well, I said to the border guards, they weren't smiling. And they said, what else are you going to talk about? So I said, well, I was going to talk about the global economic meltdown. They're writing this down. What else are you talking about? I said, well, and I thought maybe this was the trigger, would be. I said, I am going to talk about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What else are you talking about? I said, well, that pretty much wraps it up. Global warming, I would also talk about. But, it's not that long a talk. And they said, are you claiming that you're not going to be talking about the Vancouver Olympics? Now, I know this was all very important to you guys, but I wasn't even clear that they were taking place. I wasn't actually sure what he was talking about, and I looked so surprised that it made him disbelieve me even more. He said, are you saying you're not going to talk about the Olympics? I said, the Olympics? You mean when Barack Obama went to Copenhagen to try to get the Olympics in Chicago? And he said, you didn't get those Olympics. I said, I know. I said, you mean like that Rio got the Olympics? They said, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the Vancouver Olympics. I said, well, I wasn't planning to talk about the Vancouver Olympics. They weren't satisfied. I was there with two of my colleagues from Democracy Now! They told us to sit down. They went out to the car and they rifled through everything, all of our notes, everything. When I went out to check on them in the pouring rain, they were on our computers typing. And they told me to get back inside. When they came in, they pulled me into a back room and they took 4 pictures of me, as well as my colleagues. And they stapled documents into my passport. I said, I wasn't aware we needed a visa to come here. And they said, these are control documents. And I opened them up and they said that we were to leave Canada within 48 hours. Now, I was extremely late for the talk, but thank goodness for Canadians who all went out to get beer and came back an hour later and brought their friends. And so, no, I wasn't planning to talk about the Vancouver Olympics, but from that moment on, it's all I talked about. And when I came back to New York 2 days later to do Democracy Now!, it was all about the Vancouver Olympics. Let it never be said the state determines what we do. But he had definitely piqued my interest. Interestingly, we went from Vancouver to the University of Victoria to give a talk. And when I got to the bed and breakfast we were going to be staying in, that we were put up in, it was just before 6 o'clock, and it was a very nice place, and we walked in quietly. And the people who were staying there were having tea. It was very quiet. No one was really talking. And so we walked in, and we got our tea cups and little pastries, and they had the news on. It was 6 o'clock. And the top of the CBC TV news was about my detention. So I was sitting, probably wearing the same clothes, and I was sitting like sipping the tea, and it showed, well, I'll describe this in a second, but I was arrested recently at the Republican convention, so it showed the police dragging me through a police line and said, today an American journalist gets detained in Canada, and everyone looks over at me. My dear, is that you? I said, I know she looks like me, but... But when we left to take the ferry to Washington that next day, Washington State, they said I had to hand in these documents to the Canadian Border Patrol there. And, but it was U.S. Patrol there. And one of them said, yeah, I know, I've seen all about you, what happened to you over the last few days. Another guy came in and he says, wait a second, we got to take these documents. Why were you here in Canada? And the first guy says, no, just let her go. This was their fault. For the first time, they're going to get in trouble for doing something. Let's just let her pass freely. But it really is a serious violation. It's kind of no man's land when you go to the border, not knowing what your rights are. And I learned a lot about what was happening in Vancouver. If you had signs up in your house could be raided, that athletes couldn't speak against any corporation that was sponsoring the Olympics. And that was the story we did on Democracy Now! With the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association and other groups, the concern that this kind of corporate control has on a community. And it's very serious when the government and corporations join together. And I knew it well because actually I didn't say the first question that was asked of me, why this has been such a grave concern, the kind of crackdown that's going on the media. When I was coming into Canada, they first said, have you ever been arrested before? And honestly, I had to say yes. And they don't care about the circumstances. But the arrest came at the Republican Convention on September 1st, 2008. And it really shows an increasing tendency in the United States, a trend to go after the messenger, to go after the reporters, to stop the reports of what's happening on the ground. It was a very serious situation. It was the first day of the Republican Convention, September 1st. It was Labor Day.